Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Global Marketing Show. And as you know, the show is brought to you by Rapport International. Now, I say this on most of the episodes, and I don't know if you know that you can always have a free consult or a free quote from anybody at Rapport International to figure out the best way to do your localization and your translation. So just head over to Rapport Translations, RAPPORT, translations.com, and it's easy to navigate through the website. And they always bring us a tidbit. So today's is about stress. And do you want less stress in your life? Well, the Danish have a word for this. It's called PYT. It's spelled P-Y-T, and it's a cultural concept that could be very helpful in our everyday lives. It's how the Danish deal with the little things that cause stress. When you say it out loud, it reminds you to let the irritations go, like the American phrase, hey, stuff happens, if you say it the clean way. You got a flat tire? PID. Spill your coffee? PID. Parking ticket? PID. So just accept the things that are out of your control, reset your attitude, and you'll have a better peace of mind. So with that, let me introduce you to today's guest. I think we're going to have a lot of fun because he and I were just laughing before we hit record. Stefan Repin is the founder of LuckBoosters, a company that helps B2B companies with complex and long sales cycles to grow demand and close more customers through full cycle marketing and sales practices. And he helps people sell all over the world and has some fun stories about how it differs in each country. And a fun note about him is he did ABM before it was known as ABM. So Stefan, welcome.
Thank you so much. I did ABM before I was born. Yeah.
You might want to some people don't know what ABM is. So why don't you tell us what ABM is and a little bit more about what you do.
ABM? It's a very simple concept. It's also, in some companies, they also call key management or key account management. So what's that? Like, let's say you're a big company and you have, let's say on your radar, you have the Fortune 500 companies, right? And you want to work with, like, let's say one of them or any of them, this matter, right? So instead of like basically doing a pay and spray, like you like approach all of them, you've sort of figured out, like you do your own research and you see, and you look into what are the companies that are the best fit for you. Like, what's the experience you have, how many case studies you have, what makes you happy, right? Like, does it make you happy working with that type of company? You make a list of those companies and then you figure out an engagement strategy, right? Let's say it could be, you can do it digitally, right? Let's say you show them landing pages of stuff that you can build together, or you can combine it with, like direct mail, for example, and help the teams that you want to help, like cooperate between themselves, like, or you can you can send them something funny. So the idea behind is just to sort of, instead of doing one to many, doing a one to few strategy, right? So you focus your relationship building on these particular companies. And I found it being quite successful with big. So if you're a small fish and you're looking for big fish, like big companies, big corporations, they would really appreciate that because they don't like the spray and pray approach. Because again, it will take a long time for them to take a decision and say, we want to work with you. So you have to sort of put the effort into building the relationship with them, right?
Can you take one client and give us an example and walk us through what it looked like?
Yeah, of course.
Tell me a story.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I had a very interesting story. I had a client who did software for drones. So you have all these drones and Some of them are used for sort of like industrial and for like industrial sort of scopes, and like mining, for example, agriculture, or for example, in the oil industry, oil rigging, and so on. So there was this company in Belgium that they were selling like special software, management software for drones. So like imagine you have over 50 drones, right? You have 100 drones which go and survey the territory, right? You send them somewhere and then they look over your fields or over your forest, and they can find very different things. They can find parasites, they can find people trying to harm, or like for deforestation. You can find a lot of other things, right? And all of that can be shot with drones high above. So what they were looking for more clients, obviously. And we figured out that besides Europe, where drones were quite used but not so much, there were a lot of drone companies actually in South Africa. And what we did in South Africa, yeah, it was very interesting. What we did in South Africa, first of all, we connected with the key opinion leaders, right? There were like a few people. There was a lady, her name was Kim, and she actually published a guide on how to manage your drone fleet. And we got connected with Kim, and our strategy was very simple. We wanted to record the podcast episode with all the targets that we had in mind. But it was not that easy to get to them, right? Because people are busy and so on. So what we ended up doing is that because usually drone people, they're also into aviation, and we using Kim, well, we asked her, of course. We made small designer planes for each of the people we wanted to invite on the podcast. And after we eventually we did more than 20 podcast episodes, and we covered most of the key opinion leaders in South Africa, and potential buyers as well. And so what we did, we sent them, after the podcast episode, we sent them the small planes and a brochure about like our services. And it was quite successful. We did after that, a web summit. We dedicated it to South Africa and Europe, and we had more than like 20 speakers coming just from South Africa. So like South Africans loved what we do. And we closed, I think, 3 or 4 like industrial, like big accounts with big companies in South Africa. One of them was mining, the other one was agriculture, a third one was industrial building recognition or something like that. So they would go and then basically check buildings outside, so that they're not cracked and they don't have cracks. And bridges, all these like industrial structures. So it was quite successful. Again, we put a lot of research into this. So before even inviting people for the podcast, it was really important to sort of make them sort of know like what angle to take with each guest. For example, the same as you are doing, right? We're talking about ABM because I'm into ABM. When we were talking with guests who were also into aviation or certain sports, of course we would touch the parallels between those interests, and how can we would include a metaphor, how we would use that, how we would connect basketball and mining. And sometimes it came really funny. There was one particular guy who was, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's fascinating. The other thing, I just went to South Africa and went on a safari, and poaching is really big there. So I was thinking a use for drones to manage the poachers in the safari areas would be fantastic.
They are doing that, but they're underfunded. They are underfunded.
Yeah.
What I had a story from a different another guy. He had he had like these huge drones which were used for transportation, and which could bring 100 200 kilograms of, let's say, medicines, because UNICEF was contracting this guy. And he was saying that very often he would be approached by these military groups, asking him to transport ammunition, right? And they would threaten him that, okay, if you don't bring our guns, we will shoot your drone down. Yeah. And he had yeah, exactly. The guy was Australian, and eventually they shot his drone down, and the drone was like around $1 million. It was a very expensive drone. Yeah. It was insured, and they were working for UNICEF, so they got the insurance. But still, it would be big loss. And sometimes, yeah, Africa is like that. But you have to adapt to certain certain aspects. You know, where there is business, there is opportunity. So you have to take the risk.
Yeah. Ooh, I didn't even think about that being a risk, but it's got to be industry dependent. So that's a great example of how you did a coordinated outreach to specific companies. And so it was a European country reaching out to South Africa. What did they have to change to adapt their marketing and outreach from Europe, from Belgium to South Africa? Was it very different culturally?
Oh yeah, actually, interestingly enough, a lot of people, a lot of aviators from Europe, they go to South Africa to receive their aviation licenses. So, and South Africa and Europe are quite similar, but South Africa is way more, I would say, aggressive. So you have to be if in Europe you have a GDPR and you have like privacy policies and all that. In South Africa, you don't really have any of that. And sometimes, let's say you send mail and your mail wouldn't even get there, you know. They would just steal the mail in the in the local post office, they would just steal it. So we eventually ended up sending 2 or 3 copies of the same thing to the local address because mail would get lost. Then we would sometimes would certainly adapt the software to being used offline because in many places still in South Africa you do not have a very good connection, and that applies to actually to the whole world besides maybe a few places such as Europe or North America. I've seen that being in Asia, happening in Asia, in Southeast Asia. Also, internet is so locally. LATAM, of course, same situation. So you have to adapt, and you don't. I would say we were way more direct and sort of insistent than we could have been in Europe. So we would follow up with phone calls. We had to build trust. One thing that I found interesting was that it's very important if in Europe and North America you basically just do business. I would say in South Africa they want to build a relationship with you first, so you have to be like sort of friends and they have to trust you. So if you, pardon my French, fuck up, where you say and you do not deliver, you might lose the trust forever. They're very because business is risky there, so they have to trust you. So try to keep your word. For them, contracts and all of that, again, it can get a little wild. Today you have a business, tomorrow you don't. So people don't always believe in contracts, and they might forget to pay you a few times. So you have to be you have to be very specific how, because we had the case like the company didn't pay us like a large sum because one of the decision maker, he went on a safari and they couldn't find him, and they just forgot to pay us. And when eventually they found him, and when he came back, they paid us. But it was a difficult situation. We're thinking about like what to do with the contract and so on. So you have to be mindful of the fact that contracts are not always going to save your ass. So that's why it's important to have a very good relationship with the people you're working, even with accounting as well, because they'll be able to help you along the way.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so that's really good comparison between Europe and South Africa, particularly because I was just there, so it just brings it all back to me. You've worked across North America, Europe and Asia, South America. Tell me another story about a company that went into multiple markets and what had to be different to be
Yeah.
successful in each market.
I'll tell you about a company that I'm consulting right now, actually working there as the marketing. It's called Platforce, and we do
I'm sorry, what's it called?
Platforce CRM.
Platforce.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a pharma company. It's a
Uh-huh.
so the ICP, the ideal client profile, are pharma companies who have a lot of sales force. So initially, when we started our work, we thought, okay, so let's go digital, right? So we had all these like markets, like North America, we had Europe, and we thought, oh well, internet is everywhere, and we'll get there everywhere. And the thing is, if you go to markets like Latin America, like Asia, Southeast Asia, internet is not really everywhere, and people are very busy. So let's say we
Wait, you
were
said, did you say insurance is
no no no
everywhere?
no internet. They don't
Oh,
have
internet. Okay.
it's not everyone is digital, include like in particular pharma is very conservative as a market. So
Right.
you have to be very personal. The level of personal connection is very important. So what we ended up doing is it's a very weird strategy, but I stole it from someone who's been very successful in pharma too. We ended up, so we had webinars, right? Like webinars, online webinars, and we ended up calling people on the phone, cold calling people, pharma companies, and asking them to join the online webinar. It's a weird strategy, but it does work apparently with like countries like I would say Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on, because people appreciate they might not check their email, but if you give them a call, they'll answer the call and maybe they'll join your webinar. That's one strategy that we used and it worked. The second one is if you're working with distant like markets that are outside Europe that are not sort of like third world countries, second world countries, and so on. You have to, again, people have to trust you because it's a big decision buying like expensive software. And when I'm talking about $10,000 a year, it's already expensive for them, right? So they need to be able to trust you. Again, trust level. So what you will end up doing is doing road shows. So let's say you talk to the local chamber of commerce and you gather all the pharma or distributors in the region. You make a nice dinner and you make a presentation about the product you sell or the problems you help solve. And that way, you go basically region by region. You go to Cambodia, you go to Thailand, you go to Vietnam, you go to Laos, Malaysia, again, Indonesia, Bali, and so on. So you go to each country separately and you take it as a separate market. So you cannot put like if you take America and Canada, it's quite easy because they're sort of like together. In Europe, you have to localize. In Asia, you have to localize 200%, right? Because people don't not everyone speaks English. Like most educated people do speak English, but not everyone does, and they're a little bit shy. So you gotta have local representative there. A, to bring trust to the table, so you will get more trust. Second, they want to have this physical touch where they can come and touch you and then see you personally, you know. And in case they have a problem, they'll reach out to your representative. So you know, we've tried selling in the Philippines where people speak English quite well without a local representative, and we were like observing that companies that we were like sort of like that were in the sales pipeline, they would always go with the competitor, and like or competitor or other like they wouldn't choose our solution. We're thinking, why is that? And it was always on the last 100 meters, like basically sign the papers and you're done. And they would always choose someone else. And then we realized it's a trust issue. So we deployed a local representative and the deals stopped stalling and it went much better. And in addition to that, now we're assigning road shows to the Philippines and we're planning to assign road shows to all these other countries where we will sort of cruise different cities in the region and show us that we are there, we're here, do some hand holding and show that we're real, that we're there for them.
Right. So you mentioned localization for Cambodia and Thailand and for all the bunch of countries you listed off. Can you talk to me more about how you localized?
Yeah, good question. So well, look, for example, but first, I don't have I don't really have a big budget there. So how we localize is very simple. We had our documents in English, like standard procedure. I would ask once we had decent demand, so we had, let's say, our benchmark was like 5. Once we had more than 5 potential customers in the pipeline, we would ask usually the sales representative for that region would say, okay, so we need to adapt the information into the local language. So we would basically, well, again, I told you we didn't really have, our budget is quite low, but we sort of translated all the documents into that particular language. And once we agreed also with the local representative that once we close one or two big accounts in the region, it would make sense to also have a website in that particular language to bring even more trust. I know, Wendy, that's what you're doing with localization. I think it's incredibly important what you guys are doing. And I think a lot of companies, when they go off, when they leave Europe and they go to conquer the world, they go to Asia, they go into Latin America, they go into Africa. I think they forget about the fact that not everyone speaks English, and you have to localize your brochures, you have to localize your documents, because that's just not that's inefficient selling if you have it in English. It's just simple inefficient selling. It's not gonna you're not gonna sell as much as you can, and you will not be able to educate all your market. And that's really important to educate your market in the country which you target with your like go-to-market strategy.
What types of materials do you recommend your clients localize?
Oh, good question. First of all, the benefits and the pain points of your product, localize it first. You can have it as a brochure, you can have some battle cards in the local battle cards printed for the local sales rep. You can have, we also printed, let's say in Spanish, we had the comparison. So we compared our solution to other competitors. We also had that in Spanish for local markets in LATAM. Once we will go to Brazil, we'll have it, of course, in Brazilian and Portuguese. Basically, anything that shows like anything that's like bottom of funnel content. So that could be how decisions are made, business cases. Also, please translate them. Pain points, benefits also should be localized. Mm, battle cards, I said. Yeah, anything that like helps take a decision on your last 100 meters, that has to be localized.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that you talked about the relationships and building trust, and then the materials for translation are bottom of the funnel. So you didn't even say website. It was more so stuff that you'd hand out in person or deliver.
Yes, because I'll tell you this, like the website, yeah, of course it's important to localize the website, and that should be done at the same time. But look, B2B is a sphere where personal trust is way more important than company trust. So I'll trust, I know your company, Wendy, but I'll trust you way more than I do your company because I know you personally. And that's the case for most of the most B2B brands. So people follow people on LinkedIn. That's just a fact. That's why we are empowering, first of all, our sales reps with the documentation. They can show, just like sort of pass along, and then we are in the process, because it's going to take a lot of time to localize a whole website. Imagine how much materials you have there, right? If you have a, let's say, budget, of course it makes sense, you can do that. But if you are, well, if you're sort of understaffed and you're just getting there, testing the grounds, we decide, like for example, in this case, we decided to first to localize all the handouts, and then work with the website and like sort of change the language for that.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, when we're working with clients that are trying to work within a budget, we say that if you're going to do the benefits, pain sites, brochures, comparison, business cases, that's the information you put on the website. So you do one translation, and then you do a microsite that you can navigate easily to from your website. Then you've used the same content. It's not additional translation.
Well, you are smarter than me. Thank you for the advice. You got it.
I just happen to be in the industry and have worked with companies to do this. So
That's great advice. So like again, going back to ABM, right? So if you can create a microsite where you sort of like a content, well, a content deck where you will translate not all the information, but just like a part of it which you consider the most important. Yeah, that's great.
okay. Right, because oftentimes there's those extra blogs and there's, you know, press releases and stuff that doesn't really need to be translated when you're entering a market. Yeah. What types of companies do you work with and that you recommend go international?
Good question. Anyone who can scale, anyone who can scale, anyone who wants to make more money. But let's say pharma is one industry where companies tend to go international because it's quite standardized. The products are quite standardized. Software, I would say I worked a lot with software and tech vendors. That's quite international as well. And it's easily scalable because all you have is your data on the servers, and you have the applications also on your servers, and basically you can scale that easily into different markets. But you have to be mindful of how you do that. Again, create microsites, as Wendy, as you mentioned here. I would say conservative. I would actually say conservative industries like oil and gas, telecommunications. What else is there? All these like industries, they are quite, if you want to go, because they're quite old, and even in very distant countries, you will have some sort of local monopoly or like some sort of like local oligopoly. So you can try and maybe break it down or something. And so obviously conservative markets are something that like let's say industries that would make sense to scale globally.
Okay, so you work with, it sounds like a lot of software and more mature industries.
Yeah, I like industries where there is competition, because if there is no, I'll tell you this, in industries where there is no competition, it means that there might be no market, right? So you need a lot of, say, trust from the investor or from the founder,
Uh-huh.
because you'll have to create a demand, you'll have to educate the market, you have to show them the pain, you'll have to teach them, and that takes a lot of effort, like so much effort then that most of the founders I know that don't have the patience. So they just pivot, or they just close, or they just tell investors that was it. It was a good run. So it's better, like it's easier to go into a market where there is some competition, but it's not very strong, and every player has there is no monopoly, but and every player has a sort of like a share of the market, maybe 10-20%, and you have five major players or so. Because because for me at least, it means, as a marketer, it means that there is no clear positioning, and the market is fluctuating. So you have a place for innovation and brand, and these are two things that will make or break your business. So you have a strong brand, and you have some innovation. Not I'm talking not about features that everyone has, like like, but I'm talking about like real innovation, where you look into what customers really need. You look into their jobs to be done. What are they trying to get? What are they're trying to achieve with the products that are on the market, and the fact that there is a each product has a, let's say, 10-15% share or less. It means that none of them is actually doing a great job. It means that, well, they may be doing a good job for one category of users, but not for everyone, and that there is a room for improvement. And that's the type of industries I would like to go after.
That's a really good answer, because I typically would say, oh, I'd rather go after an industry where there's minimal competition so I can build a name in the area. But you're right, there's a lot of education that has to be done in that area. So and we do much better at Rapport International when we've had somebody come to us that has had bad translation and they say, oh, I need somebody who can really do high quality. That's a good prospect for us.
Correct. I was working with a company. I was 3 or 4 years ago, and I was a part of the agency, and they were selling application store optimization, basically like getting your app higher in the rating. And their source of demand was actually bad reviews. They would literally scrape the app store, the Play Store, and the Apple Store for applications which had bad reviews, and they would go and sort of create a strategy around, like, well, engaging with those companies and saying, look, you have bad reviews. These are particular ways how you can guys improve. And they had those like microsites you were talking about. So because they figured like a pattern that, let's say the user interface was bad here and here, and they would create a pattern for maybe 5 or 6 cases, and they would show it to different companies, and that's how they landed clients. It was quite efficient, I'd say.
Yes, yes, that's fantastic. Speaking of optimization and microsites, you said you work with a lot of software companies. One thing that I've seen with software companies is that they don't think about international growth until it's too late, and they don't build their platforms that can be localized or translated. What have you seen in that area?
Yeah, what I've seen in that area, let's say I've seen many companies in Europe trying to conquer the United States, but and they, tech people have this like mindset that, oh, we're all digital. So if it's the website is in English and our communication is in English, it means that we'll conquer America with or Canada with, just because it's in English. But it's not the case here. You really have to you really have to get there into the market and start talking to people and key opinion leaders. I know a case when there's this company called Lemlist, LEMLIST.com, and their closest competitor is SalesLoft. And they were thinking about strategies. How can they conquer the American market? And they were trying this digital strategy and that digital strategy and trying to do it all online. And at some point they figured out, listen, if we don't get on our enemy's turf, we won't be able to win. So they contracted a few influencers, a few market influencers who knew a lot of salespeople locally in America and Canada, and they started doing a lot of evangelism, like product evangelism, brand evangelism, and building community on in those local markets. Again, we're talking about meetups, we're talking about dinners with sales leaders, we're talking about get-togethers, offline events, all of that. They had to fund all those activities, which are sort of like which which mean the dark funnel. You can't really track them, but those things actually move your business forward when you're coming on such a big market and rich market such as the United States or Canada. So thinking that only with digital you'll get there and you'll able to localize on a different market, that's that's big time BS. Like that's being very naive, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good part, a good point. I've never heard of it called the dark funnel. So that's something I'll add into the sales and market, our AVM strategy.
Dark social, they call it also.
Dark social. Yeah, we've worked with some companies where they have thought ahead and then they've given us access to their back end and had us go in and translate the software there because they had mirror platforms in there. And so it was really easy for them to launch across different languages and countries. So unfortunately, we have run out of time because this has been a fascinating conversation with the selling market. And I'm going to ask this question at the end. What's your favorite foreign word?
Wabi sabi?
Wabi-sabi?
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Wabi sabi means in Japanese it means basically it's about accepting the imperfection and the sort of transience of the world. That the beauty is being beautiful doesn't mean that you're perfect. Being beautiful means that you're imperfect. And if you look at things that the nature created, most of them are imperfectly beautiful, right?
Mhm.
And we should there is a interesting concept in Japan. They if something like a cup or a teacup or something is broken, they don't mend it in a way that they don't fix it in a way that you won't see where it happened. Instead, they would actually paint with gold, like with the golden color, the part where it was broken or torn, which would show that you're being perfect broken, basically, which shows that it's a part of the wabi sabi concept. So yeah, that's the part I like.
That's fantastic. There's something in the Native American culture too that captures that when they sew something or make something, there'll be something a little bit off to capture that it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm probably not articulating well. If any of the listeners know more about it, please let me know and we'll do a tidbit about it from Rapport International. But I love that. Wabi-sabi is great. Any final recommendations for our listeners?
If you guys you're thinking of getting localized in a different country, please go to Wendy. If you're thinking about selling in a different country, then come to me. I'll help you even with free advice. I'm always open to consulting for free and helping out the community and business people. Being a founder myself, I know how hard it is to build a business alone, and obviously everyone needs friends. So I'll be your friend.
Wonderful. How can people reach you?
Just Google LuckBoosters.com, LuckBoosters.com, or just find me, Stefan Repin. Just Google me and you'll find my LinkedIn profile. Just drop me a message and you'll get the help needed.
Excellent. So you can find all the links on the show notes wherever you're listening to the podcast. His name is spelled Stef as in Frank, A-N, Repin, last name R-E-P as in Peter, I-N. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate if you give us a 5-star or forward this episode along to somebody that might be interesting in hearing about how to sell international. This was a lot of great advice, and I really appreciate it, Stefan, for you being here. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is certainly mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So tune in next time where we'll have another great guest for you to how to expand internationally.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.